about half an hour before the collapse of Building 7, she's on BBC World announcing that the Building 7 had collapsed, and it's behind her in the shot.
And it's a live shot. It's not a pre-recorded or it's not a blue screen or green screen shot. It's a live shot. The building is there behind her in the background, still standing clearly in the shot, and she's announcing in advance that it had already collapsed, the words that they actually used.
She wasn't the only one that did it either, too. There was another CNN reporter that did the same thing.
I'll be posting some of these videos to the website with this podcast. As always, all shows of What on Earth is Happening are archived on the podcast page of whatonearthishappening.com. Daryl, stay with us. Folks, stay with us. We'll be right back after these messages. You're listening to What on Earth is Happening on the Oracle Broadcasting Network. 9/11, an inside job, an example of a human sacrifice ritual in the modern day, an act of chaos sorcery, the defining occult event of our times, and so much more. We were talking about the advanced knowledge that so many people had of these events on this day, how they were even reading scripts with the buildings that they're talking about had already collapsed, still standing in the background of the shot, not even bothering to take a look at the skyline behind them and realize that the building that they're telling people had already come down was still standing. Unbelievable, and people can still believe that this is just a coincidence. Speaking of knowledge in advance, the Patriot Act was written well in advance of 9/11. This is 1,000 pages of intensive legislation that was already on board, already being tried to be put through.
Right on Bush's desk prior to 9/11.
That's right. Trying to put it through through the House and Senate, and it was not being accepted. People did not want to vote for this. But after 9/11, they all voted for it, with the exception of one individual on a single day without even reading the bill. Okay? So, advanced knowledge. How about advanced planning? Look at how the wars in Afghanistan and Iraq were already on board well in advance of 9/11. Darryl, do you want to speak to that?
Sure. Actually, on September 4th of 2002, there was an article right in CBS News, mainstream news again, but, of course, the truth is only told once in mainstream media, then it's buried and it's covered. But here it is. CBS News has learned, this is September 4th of 2002, CBS News has learned that barely 5 hours after American Airlines Flight 77 plows into the Pentagon, Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld was telling his aides to come up with plans for striking Iraq, even though there was no evidence linking Saddam Hussein to the attacks. That's according to notes taken by aides who were with Rumsfeld in the National Military Command Center on 9/11. Notes that show exactly where the road toward war with Iraq began, reports CBS News national security correspondent David Martin. At 9:53 a.m., just 15 minutes after the plane had hit the Pentagon, of course, not even a plane, it's a missile, and while Rumsfeld was still outside helping with the injured, the National Security Agency, which monitors communications worldwide, intercepted a phone call from one of Osama bin Laden's operatives in Afghanistan to a phone number in the former Soviet Republic of Georgia. The caller said he had heard good news and that another target was still to come, an indication he knew another airliner, one that eventually crashed in Pennsylvania, was at the very moment zeroing in on Washington, this says. Now, it says it was 12:05 p.m. when the director of Central Intelligence told Rumsfeld about the intercepted conversation. Rumsfeld felt it was vague, that it might not mean something, and that it was no good basis for hanging hat. In other words, the evidence was not clear-cut enough to justify military action against bin Laden. But later that afternoon, the CIA reported the passenger manifest for the hijacked airliners showed 3 of the hijackers were suspected al-Qaeda operatives. And with the intelligence all pointing toward bin Laden, Rumsfeld ordered the military to begin working on strike plans. And at 2:40 p.m., the notes quote Rumsfeld as saying he wanted the best info fast, judge whether good enough to hit SH, meaning Saddam Hussein, at the same time, not only UBL, which was the initials used to identify Osama bin Laden. Now, 1 year later, there is very little evidence Iraq was involved. In September 11th attacks, there was none. He had it all planned out just like in the PNAC where they said they wanted to have a massive change and new Pearl Harbor.
And they went on this campaign in cahoots with the mainstream media, the Bush administration, to remember this whole build-up to the Iraq invasion, that the smoking gun would come in the form of a mushroom cloud, that he had weapons of mass destruction, and always hinting that it had to do with the form of Islamic terrorism that had to do with the 9/11 event without actually coming out in the open and saying it. But then after the invasion, openly admitting that Iraq had nothing to do with the events of 9/11.
And we have George Bush's quote where he said, "Let us never tolerate outrageous conspiracy theories concerning the attacks of September the 11th. Malicious lies, they attempt to shift the blame away from the terrorists themselves, away from the guilty."
Pretty good likeness there, Darryl. So, folks, I know we've covered so much in such a short amount of time. And again, this is for a reason. The research is all out there for you to do. We're going to be talking about a couple other aspects of the event, some of the types of explosives that may have been used to bring these buildings down, nanothermite residue found in the World Trade Center dust, some connections to potential exotic weaponry that may have been used at perverted applications of Tesla technology that may have been employed on as part of this event.
With the first two buildings, with the North Tower and the South Tower, yes.
So that's coming up. But let's go to the phones and take a couple of phone calls. So here we go. Caller, you're live on What on Earth is Happening on this 9/11 Inside Job show. What do you have for us today?
Hi, Darryl. Mark, is it me?
Yes, you're on.
Yes. Oh, hey, this has been a great show. Keep up the good work. As you were saying, though, I wanted to bring an important point on this, is that we do have them dead to rights. And like you had said earlier, Mark, if we find out we should be finding out who specifically was responsible for scheduling those drills to confuse the military, because we can see that that's clearly what their intention was. We can definitely serve public warrants as accessories, seize information for evidence, and continue on our way to get the masterminds also. But that relationship of prior knowledge and setting us up to be conned is also present in Able Danger also. I mean, Anthony Schaefer claimed he was following Otta around and had terabytes of video of him, and Anthony Schaefer doesn't claim Bush needs to be arrested for mass murder because he was directly complicit in closing investigations. No, he gives you a cover that, Muhammad Ali is a Muslim fundamentalist, and yet we know he was a partier and had been on Abramov's casino cruise ships many times, and we have interviews with his girlfriend. Similarly, too, Peter B. Collins yesterday or the day before did an outstanding report on an individual who calls himself Iron Man, who notified the CIA, he's a military intelligence officer, who notified the CIA, the FBI, the Bush administration, everybody just prior to 9/11 because he had inside source knowledge that the Pentagon was going to be attacked, and so were the two towers. But then he claims, we goofed up. We're too stupid, and that's why they had to attack them. I would demand the arrest of Iron Man and Anthony Schaefer. Anthony Schaefer is a traitor because we can clearly see, as you were talking about Mineta giving his report to the commission, they censored that from the reports, similarly like General Lamed. Condoleezza Rice at a press conference, and during the press conference, a reporter asks her, well, what's the story about General Lamed in so many words, financing this operation? And she says that she didn't have any meetings with him, and yet we know he met with many of the commissioners, 9/11 commissioners, who ended up ignoring him altogether later. But they censored that from the White House transcripts on the Internet, and that's available in Loose Change Final Cuts. So that we know that they... and also... if we believe their nonsense is Anthony Schaefer's, then Bin Laden would have had an accessory to plant the explosives in the towers because we have video of liquefied iron flowing from the towers.
For a month afterward, yes. Yes, they were for a whole month.
Caller, you bring up so many great points that need to be looked into. And like I have said to people in the past, do not underestimate the intelligence of the people who were running this event. These are highly trained experts in how the human mind works. This is definitely a psychological warfare operation.
Magic.
And
magic.
Yeah, these people know how to create certain effects in the subconscious, in the conscious mind, so that people react in certain ways, and then they will go for things that they ordinarily would want to have absolutely nothing to do with. Caller, stay on the line. We'll come back with you after this next break. You're listening to What on Earth is Happening, ladies and gentlemen, right here on the Oracle Broadcasting Network. Don't go anywhere.
It's really awesome. The man on the street with the Harley shirt. Remember that? Who was telling people what to think about what car.
We're back on What on Earth is Happening. Talking about the inside aspects of the 9/11 event. Before the break, we were talking with a caller on the back to wrap up this call, and then Daryl and I are going to go over a couple more elements of 9/11, and then we'll go back to the phones to round out the show. So here we go. Caller, are you still with us?
Yes.
Great.
Am I still on? Yes.
Let's take another point, and then we're going to go to caller. Yes.
Sure. We got to remember, they are conning the American teen soldiers for death, and we hear the interviews they give, and they don't have very strong minds to find a way in this world and go and follow blindly, in fact, by not upholding the oath that they gave to God and country, but they have minds of like 12-year-olds in some cases. We are affected by, let's call it magic, and to me, they're really poor magic tricks, but I know that some of them are a little bit more complicated, but some of the easiest ones to defeat as a trick is, they lost the Enron documents, so we can't continue investigations. That's a magic trick. It works on people who don't know anything about it, but if you pursue knowledge on Enron, we know how they quadrupled the cost of energy in California. We know that they moved the assets from the company to the Cayman Islands and had fictitious numbers on the stock market total board, and people who held stock had a contractual agreement not to be able to touch it while the numbers fictitiously fell, and they said, your money's lost, but they really moved it to the Cayman Islands. So that's where the investigations halted. Similarly, in the Pentagon, where they murdered those auditors who were investigating Rumsfeld's mysterious losing $2.7 trillion, and they said, those guys were murdered, so now we have no interest in tracking that money down. All the paperwork was destroyed. Well, we know it's got to do with Rumsfeld. We got to know it's got to do with today. There's been 80% of the monthly expenditures in both of these wars is completely unaudited. It's black. They say it's black ops military intelligence. These guys need to be taken in by the military and serve the rest of their lives behind bars, or be formally executed under American standing law for treason and for torture. Torture warrants death 100% of the time. It's only an enemy of God and man who claims they can't hear me say these words unchallenged worldwide.
That's right.
It does warrant death.
And the military should do their job of protecting this country against enemies, foreign and domestic. And that's what this was all about. Domestic enemies carrying out this job. Caller, great points that you raised.
Absolutely.
Daryl, let's get into quickly a couple other of the physical aspects of 9/11. Let's talk about the nanothermite residue that has been discovered in the World Trade Center dust, and then transition into talking about the possibility of even more exotic weaponry being used on that day.
Well, very first, I'll also thank you, caller, for mentioning that people were told what to think about the operation as it was happening. They even had a man on the street in New York dressed in a Harley shirt. You can find this on YouTube, where he's being interviewed by the media, and he's a plant. He looks like he's an eyewitness, but he's a plant, and he's telling people about, of course, the floors just pancaked onto themselves, and it was just obviously a pancaking collapse.
Right.
And he's telling people
the fires weakened the steel,
weakening the structure. He's telling people, he's telling people what to think about it, so that they don't actually think for themselves.
That's right. That's right. And in a state of fear, that becomes a piece of cake. People are willing to readily accept what is being told to them by someone who seems assured of themselves. So what about the possibility of some of the more exotic weapon? Let's look at the nanothermite residue. Do you have anything to say about that? I believe that's Stephen Jones's work.
Yeah, mostly Stephen